this is James, and in this video, I'm honoring the request of a couple of viewers who asked to see the Kipper Cards by category in action. So, stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this video. If this is your first time here, I'd like to say welcome, and if you're a returning viewer and visitor, I'd like to say welcome back. As I said in the opening, this is actually a viewer request. I'm honoring the request of two viewers in particular. I'm going to give a shout out to Pandas Rover and Harlem Nights. Each of them asked me on the heels of the wrap-up of my Kipper Cards by Category series if I would be willing to make some videos sharing some examples on how I might work a few readings using the cards by category in terms of like how would they interact or interplay with one another in a reading. So Harlem Nights specifically asked for a 9-card box, and that is the reading I'm going to present today because I literally did this one this morning and I thought it was so great. For me personally, it was great that I wanted to share it. So a little bit about setup. So I'm filming this on November the 2nd because I wrapped up the series yesterday, which was November the 1st. And I did this reading this morning. So my personal process is when it comes to daily readings, I read my cards every day. I usually get up, get myself centered, and then I pull cards. And they may be tarot cards, oracle cards, some other system, but whatever I feel inclined to work with in the moment. And I remembered that these viewers asked me about working with the cards, so I said, you know what, I'll do a Kipper 9-box reading for myself. So the question was, I asked, what do I need to know about posting Kipper-related content on my channel using my deck, because my deck is color-coded by category, right, using my deck, and they asked to see examples with my deck, I should say, by the way. On my channel in the future. So that was the question. And so I laid out the cards. And so in the next segment, we're going to go through the cards and I'm going to take you through the process as I did it this morning, right? So you'll get some insight as to how I read the cards for myself personally. So I'm hoping in advance that this is going to be helpful. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a look at that 9-card box. And here we are with the cards on the table. So I have the 9-card box laid out exactly as it was this morning. So this is usually my process when I'm reading cards for myself. I usually start with having the cards face down and then I turn them over one by one. So I will take you step by step through my process and how I worked through this particular layout. So whenever I do a box spread, I usually just shuffle the cards, deal them out, and I deal them out in rows of 3. So literally this is card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then once I lay them out, then what I do is I take the first card and turn that over. So the first card here, card 5, that's what I mean by the first card for me, is the focus card. So I always look there first. So in this particular case, so now remember, the question was, I asked, what do I need to know about showcasing or presenting more Kipper-related content on my YouTube channel, and especially with working with my own deck? So, the card in the center is sad news. So the first thing that we want to take into account is that it is a cause and effect card, right? So what I'm going to do is this card is going to be the cause, and then this card here on the right is going to be the effect. Remember, card behind the person in sad news is always the cause, and then the card in front of the person in sad news is always the effect, right? So, but as a focus card, the meaning of it here is that this card would represent messages, news or messages that are sad or upsetting, or that there's going to be sadness or upset or disappointment, right? So that would be the way I would look at it. So now, for me, as the person asking the question, I could take into account right now with just a single card that I might be upset with news or messages that I receive in accordance to the content as it is posted, or that there are going to be other people outside of me who are going to be upset or disappointed somehow, some way. So now that is the start. So now let's take a look at the next card, which I turn over, is the opening card, card 1. And usually the way I look at this is the reason why I'm asking the question. Okay, so here we have thoughts, right? And now here we have a stop card, right? So I don't have to take into account any other card. If I wanted to, I could just focus on the one card. So here as the opening card, it would suggest that this card is about planning, right? So it's about the way I think, right? Remember what I said in video 5 of the series is that this card can represent thinking, right? What's on my mind, ideas, things like that. But it can also be a card that represents planning. So for me, since I asked a question about posting Kipper-related content using my deck on my channel, then this is about things having to do with planning. So I would have to plan things out, right? So now remember, the stop card is just like the one card. Like this is the essence of the reading with just the one card. Remember, it's the period, right? So this is just it. It's like full stop. This is the issue here. It's about planning. And so for those of you who may not know, is I work 2 jobs. So that is the reason, if you've been following my channel for some time, that is the reason why I don't post as often as I used to, is because my work schedule, because I have 2 jobs, is quite demanding. And the reason why I was able to even film as much as I have lately is because I actually am off from one of my jobs, so I have more time on my schedule, which is why I wanted to make sure I got the series done before I returned back to work. So, but for me, this card, I'm looking at it, is about planning, right? And planning for the long term, right? So that is the takeaway that I got from the thoughts card. So now what I do is I did the opening. Now I'm going to go to the ending just to see how things turn out. So the card we have here is Great Fortune, right? So now the first thing I will say is another stop card, right? So the first thing that I want to say is that this card, remember, is about blessings and abundance. So it is the best card in the Kipper card deck system. So regardless of all the other cards, this card is so positive that it's going to outshine all the other cards, whether they're challenging or not. Yeah. But in the end, if I plan, maybe if I take the 2 cards and mirror them, if I plan wisely or correctly, then in the end, it's going to be a blessing. And a blessing not just for me as the person presenting the material, but for maybe those who are watching it, who are on the receiving end, right? But we still have this issue about the disappointment and the upset. So we'll have to see what more that is about. So then once I look at these 3 cards in that order, then what I do is I turn all the other cards over. So here we have, in position 2, we have main person female. Position 3, we have prison. Then we have house. Position 4. Position 6, we have marriage. Position 7, we have young girl or young lady. And then in position 8, excuse me, we have a long road. So the first thing that I do after I turn all the cards over is, and especially because my deck is color coordinated, right, or color coded, then the first thing you want to see is there a group of cards that stand out? And the first thing is that there's a majority of stop cards. So now, remember, the stop cards kind of slow the story down, and a number of them could suggest that there may not be as much progress in this endeavor as I might like. Okay, so that would be the reasoning for the stop cards, especially in a number of them, right? So it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean anything problematic. It just is saying, like, if you're going to do it, just be aware that there may not be as much progress being made as you would like, meaning me. And then there is one movement card here, a long road. So that kind of just reinforces this idea because there's not as much movement as there is stop. Okay, so now I'll take you through the rest of the way that I read this box. So then what I did was I wanted to see what the cause and effect dynamic here is. So I looked at house, and so house, as you know, represents one's home life, one's personal life, domestic affairs, right? So it would be if this is the cause of the sad news, then the disappointment or upset, the cause of it would be my own home life, my own personal life, right? And then what would that affect? So then it would affect, marriage is about commitment. So it would affect the commitment, right? The commitment to post more Kipper related content using my deck in the future on the channel, right? So it would just say for those watching that I'm going with the idea here that the upset or disappointment might be with other people and maybe partly myself, right? Because I maybe things that are happening in my personal life would affect the commitment, and I may be holding on to the idea that I'm disappointing people or I'm letting people down, right? But it could also be the disappointment with other people because I'm not posting as much or they're not seeing as much content, right? Now, the other thing with marriage, I liken marriage to ring in Lenormand. So if you're familiar with that system, then you will understand what I'm about to say. For me, the ring card in Lenormand has a meaning that can represent something that is cyclical, right? So it could just suggest that I can post, but it may run in cycles. It may not be consistent, or it may not be continuous, right? And that would make sense with the stop cards, right? There may be like lulls or breaks in the pattern of posting, right? And again, I'm fully aware that, or acknowledging that, the chief reason would be because of my working life, right? And how that might be wreaking havoc on my personal life, right? Because I may not be at home as much. That just came to me in the moment. I may not be home as much, right? Okay. So in order for me to post, I'd have to be home on a more consistent basis. All right. So that would be, for me, my reasoning with the cause and effect. Okay. So now the next thing we can do is we could take a look at the columns, right? So with the way I read it, the columns, this would be the past, present, future. Okay. So if I go with the first column being the past, here we have thoughts, right? So here we have planning, you know, planning. And then here we have house. So I would have to say here, planning around my home life, my personal life, things like that. Right. And then the young lady, I'm not seeing this as a young woman in particular because I'm single and I live alone. So I don't see this as somebody who's connected to me. Remember, the people cards are people who are connected to main person one or main person two, right? So I'm not getting a sense of that. I'm going to go with the idea that she represents the themes of creativity, right? Creating, right? So I have to create the content, yes? Right, so here is the plan. I'd have to plan my home life in order to create the content, right? Remember what I said about thoughts. Thoughts for me is a card that represents scheduling and putting things on the calendar. And so here that's been problematic in the past. But if I take this as advice now for maybe moving forward, it would suggest planning or scheduling it around your home life, your personal life, and it's going to require some level of creativity. So that's how I would look at that column, right? And remember now we have two stop cards here. So remember now this has been problematic in the past because the stop cards represent something slowing down or something that has not been progressing a great deal. Okay, so now let's take a look at the middle column. So here we have main person two or main person female. So that for me suggests that there is a woman who is playing a significant role or part in the unfolding of the situation, right? And then she is on top of sad news. So for me, it links the disappointment possibly with a woman who may be looking forward to uh, the Kipper related content in the future, right? So she may have to, if she's watching and she may know who she may have to work through, the cards are suggesting that she's going to have to work through any possible issues around disappointment that she might experience, right? And then the card at the bottom gives her hope because here we have movement, right? So it's suggesting like being in it for the long haul or the long road, right? This card would suggest down the road, being patient. So it's not saying that I'm not going to post Kipper material or that I may not post it as often as she would like, but it is going to be there. So this card is suggesting for her to be patient. Right, so now I'm not linking, this is an important point, I'm not linking the cause and effect this way. I'm not doing it with the column. I'm doing the cause and effect with the row. Right, so I'm just literally reading this down. That since she's on top of this, this is something that the woman is going to have to work on overcoming. And it suggests that on some level for her, it's going to take time, but there will be progress made here, but it's going to take some time. Yeah? So that's what I'm seeing with that. Now let's look at the future. So here we have prison. So prison is a card that can represent limitation or restriction. Again, with the idea that I may not be posting as often as maybe I would like or viewers would like, right? And note here that prison nights to house, right? Again, saying the limitation and restriction might be tied to my home life or my personal life. Right? So remember, prison is about limitation, restriction, and blocks. Right? So now let's read this column down. So in the future, possibly there's going to be a limitation and restriction regarding a commitment, right? Or regarding the commitment to post. But in the end, great fortune, somehow that is going to be overcome. Because remember now, this is the best card in the deck. Now what you could do is you can link prison and great fortune because marriage is a connector card and it connects these two. Now I usually read the connector card this way as well as this way. So it's saying that the limitation and restriction is connected to the commitment, but also the blessing and abundance is also connected to the commitment. So it could just be a matter of working through the limitations and restrictions. That would make sense to come planning. Right? So that's how I would look at that. Now, I didn't touch on the connector card here next to the cause and effect card. I just did the cause and effect factor, but not the factor here. So it would suggest too, like the sad news or the disappointment is connected to the commitment, right? And then the only other thing I could do here would be to take into account that the image on Long Road kind of goes up to sad news, right? So saying too, like there is the path to disappointment or sadness will change over time right down the road. So there's that. Right, so here we have main person 2 looking towards the thoughts card, right? So it could just be about her doing her own research and analysis of the cards herself, right? It could also be too, like this is more about main person 2. If I take the lens off of myself and make it that she is the character who has the starring role in this 9-card box, then it kind of shifts a little bit, yeah? Because here it's about research, analysis, what are her plans, right? And maybe she's looking forward to the content as a way to maybe move past her own limitations or restrictions, excuse me, right? Because this card here behind her would represent what's known as inauspicious placement. It could be a challenging position. Right? And so it could just be about her wanting to move beyond her own limitations and restrictions. And for her, then this, I was about to say tableau, but this 9-card box is suggesting that it's going to take some time, right? That would be all the stop cards. Right? Being patient with her own sense of learning how to read the cards, especially by category, right? And that is for the viewers who specifically asked me to present examples of how the different categories of cards would interplay with each other, yeah? And then for this woman, it's about her commitment. How committed is she to working with the cards, right? What is her level of commitment with her home life, right? I always say to people especially my coaching clients, that you have to be willing to set aside some time on a regular and consistent basis in order to learn the cards. I read my cards every day, and so I always encourage, and I understand that not everybody lives the same life that I live and has the same amount of time that I have. But if you're wanting to move beyond your own limitations and restrictions with the cards, what are you willing to do differently? What could you do in terms of plans, especially with your home life? And with some people, it may be you may have to get creative, young lady. Now, this could also be for somebody who may have a youngster in the house, right? Here we have house, youngster, right? So this could be somebody who's got a child. In this particular case, specifically a daughter. And how can you plan for that? Now, this is her future. How can you make plans with your home life, especially if you have a young child in the home? Right? And on this side, too, the person may be married. And how does that factor into the situation? Now, it could also be with the sad news here. It could be if the person is learning the cards, right? Then it could be paying attention to the cards or the messages that you receive, especially the ones that are, either disappointing or upsetting or challenging you on an emotional level, yeah? Because that would affect your level of commitment to practicing Kipper reading, right? But again, this card is very positive. It's saying over time that energy could shift, but you'd have to be willing to give it a chance. Right now, the order would be different here because this would be behind the person, and this is in front. So it could just be saying too, like in the future, being really creative. That's going to go a long way. The creativity is going to go a long way, and you'll probably see better results. But it's about being patient. Now remember, this is a long road, so the timing of this card is like 1 to 2 years. So you have to be willing to put in some level of time. Give it some time in order to see results. So when I initially looked at this morning, I went with it, sticking to the question, but just looking at it now, there could be a different shift or a different take on it if I remove myself from the question. But as a reader, I tend not to stray too far from the question. So I'm going to offer my first analysis as the analysis in alignment with the question, but as I was talking this out, I do see another possibility here. So I'm going to wrap up there. This was one example of how I read a 9-card box with the Kipper cards by category. So I hope for the viewers who asked me on the heels of part 5 of the video series, I figured I wanted to get this in because, again, my work schedule is going to change in a few days. And I thought this was great this morning. On the heels of that, I'm like, ooh, this is a great reading to post. So I hope it was helpful for Pandas Rover and Harlem Nights, especially because they are the ones who asked to see some demos. And as I'm acknowledging them, I'm going to offer up for people to kind of weigh in on the comments. Let me know if you want to see maybe additional videos using just one example per video, or if you are familiar with my older format where I used to post like maybe 2 or 3 examples in one video, a longer video. Let me know what your preference is, and I will take that into account. That will help me in terms of planning, right? Planning to post the content. So if you would be willing to do that, that would be extremely helpful and beneficial. And so I'm thanking those of you who are going to do that in advance. So this is James Himm Mitchell. I'm signing off. Thank you for spending this time and space with me, and I look forward to seeing you in a future Kipper related video. Take care and have a great day.